Alexei Navalny. During a flight from Tomsk to Moscow, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny fell very ill, so the plane had made an emergency landing in Omsk, where he was taken to the hospital. 2 days later, he was evacuated to a hospital in Germany at the request of his wife. The German government announced that Navalny was poisoned by Novichok nerve agent, a poison designed in the Soviet era, 8 times stronger than VX and hard to be detected. A month later, after discharge from the hospital, Navalny asserted that only 3 high-ranking Russian officials can give orders to use Novichok, but they cannot make such a decision without Putin's orders. In December 2020, Western media organizations published an investigation implicating agents from Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, in Navalny's poisoning. After that, Navalny himself made a phone call with the Russian agent who poisoned him, using a caller ID spoofing software to make the call look like it was coming from an FSB work phone number. During the phone conversation, Navalny posed as an assistant of the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, pretending to debrief the agent about the operation and asking for details of why the mission had failed. The agent unwittingly confessed that the Novichok agent had been applied to Navalny's underwear while he was staying at the hotel in Tomsk, but while Navalny had warned them for the flight as planned, the poison had apparently been absorbed too slowly. He attributed Navalny's survival to the pilots rerouting the flight and doctors in Omsk administering an antidote immediately. Following Navalny's medical evacuation to Germany, the man said he had been sent to recover Navalny's clothes so that they could be treated to remove traces of Novichok before they could be tested by independent experts. In January 2021, Navalny returned to Russia and was immediately detained. He was sentenced to several prison sentences on several different charges until February 2024, when the Russian prison service reported that Navalny had died at the age of 47 due to a blood clot. Ahmad Shah Massoud, a famous guerrilla fighter nicknamed the Lion of Panjshir, a province located in the northeastern part of Afghanistan, was assassinated by 2 al-Qaeda operatives posing as journalists. Massoud commanded the forces of the Northern Alliance, backed by the United States, India, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Iran, fighting against Taliban forces backed by Pakistan. Shortly after a press conference in the European Parliament, in which Massoud denounced the Taliban, al-Qaeda, and Pakistani interference, Osama bin Laden called for volunteers to deal with Massoud. 2 al-Qaeda jihadists were provided with a stolen television camera and a battery belt packed with explosives. With an interview fraudulently arranged, the 2 assassins were escorted by Taliban to the Panjshir Valley, flying by helicopter to join Massoud at his rear headquarters. After weeks of failed attempts, Massoud agreed to sit with them and conduct the interview. After peppering Massoud with questions about his condemnation of bin Laden, they detonated the camera battery belt, mortally wounding Massoud. Jong-Nam. 2 female recruits for North Korean intelligence in Kuala Lumpur International Airport approached Kim Jong-Nam, the half-brother of the dictator of North Korea, grabbed him from behind and splashed a liquid of nerve agent VX on his face. Sweating and screaming in pain, Kim was given medication at the airport, but he died 20 minutes after the attack while being transferred from the airport to the hospital. Kim was born in 1971 in North Korea, the country that's so isolated that I could find very few images on the internet to serve this story. For many years, it was believed that Kim, his father's oldest son, was being prepared to be the next leader of North Korea after his father Kim Jong-il. But that had come to an end in 2001, when he was caught trying to sneak into Japan, the arch-enemy of North Korea, using a fake passport. So, he was living abroad since his exile from North Korea. After years away from the strict confines of North Korea, Kim had a taste for the outside world. He stated that the country would collapse without reform, but reform would lead to the collapse of the Kim dynasty, and that his brother Kim Jong-un would be a puppet figure used by the ruling elite. That singled him out as the highest-profile critic. And you know the rest. Anwar Al-Sadat. A victory parade was held in Cairo by Egyptian President Anwar Al-Sadat to celebrate the 8th anniversary of Egypt's crossing of the Suez Canal during the 1973 war. Al-Sadat was protected by 4 layers of security, and the army parade should have been safe due to ammunition seizure rules. As Egyptian Air Force jets flew overhead, army troop trucks paraded by. One of the trucks contained an assassination squad, led by Lieutenant Khalid Islambouli, a member of the Islamic Jihad organization, who was enraged by al-Sadat's peace initiative with Israel and the United States relating to the Camp David Accords. As the assassin's truck passed the tribune, Islambouli forced the driver to stop, From there, the assassins dismounted, and Islambuli approached Al-Sadat with 3 hand grenades concealed under his helmet. Al-Sadat stood to receive his salute as he thought the killers were part of the show, so he stood saluting them, whereupon Islambuli threw all his grenades at Al-Sadat, only one of which exploded but fell short. Additional assassins in the truck exited, firing into the stands. The attack lasted about 2 minutes. Al-Sadat was hit and fell to the ground, and people threw chairs around to shield him from the hail of bullets, but he and 10 others were killed. Islambuli and the other assassins were arrested later and executed. 2 army men by firing squad and 3 civilians by hanging. Jamal Khashoggi, an exiled Saudi dissident journalist, entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to obtain some documents, where he was choked to death by a 15-member team brought in from Saudi Arabia for the operation, including forensic specialists to hide evidence of the crime. A member of the 15-man team appeared in the CCTV records leaving the consulate by the back door. He was dressed up in Khashoggi's clothes and wearing a fake beard that resembled Khashoggi's facial hair, his glasses, and his watch to lend credibility to the Saudi government's version of events, that Khashoggi walked out through the back not long after he arrived. As he didn't get out of the consulate, Khashoggi's fiancée, who was waiting for him outside, contacted the Turkish authorities and reported him missing. 20 Saudi nationals were accused by Turkish prosecutors, including the Saudi royal court advisor and former deputy intelligence chief. After repeatedly shifting its narration, the Saudi government admitted that Khashoggi had been killed in a premeditated murder, but denied that the killing took place on the orders of the Crown Prince bin Salman. Bin Salman said that he accepted responsibility for the killing because it happened under his watch, but asserted that he did not order it. Other Saudi exiled dissidents said later that they were previously approached by Saudi authorities, who urged them to visit the Saudi embassy in the countries where they live to collect new passports before the death of Khashoggi. Abraham Lincoln. The 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, was shot in the head at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth. The assassination occurred only days after the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia to Union forces, which marked the end of the American Civil War. Booth was a famous performer, known for his charisma and good looks. He grew up in the border state of Maryland, but was particularly popular as an actor in Richmond, Virginia, and considered himself a Southerner. Moreover, he passionately advocated the slave system. Having promised his mother that he would not fight for the Confederacy, Booth remained in the North during the Civil War, and his hatred of abolitionists and Lincoln deepened. On the morning of the Assassinations Day, Booth, distraught over the collapse of the Confederacy, knew that the president would be attending a performance of the comedy, Our American Cousin, that evening at Ford's Theater. At Ford's Theater, Booth made his way to the private box in which Lincoln and his wife were watching the play with their guests. Finding the president's box essentially unguarded, Booth entered it and barred the outside door from inside. Then, at a moment in the play that he knew would elicit a big laugh, Booth burst in through the box's inner door. He shot Lincoln in the back of the head and leapt from the box to the stage below, then disappeared through a door at the side of the stage where his horse was being held for him, and rode off out of Washington. Lincoln was attended to immediately by several doctors who were in the audience, but he was pronounced dead on the next day. The search for Booth and the other conspirators was the largest manhunt in American history to that date. While the massive manhunt, fueled by a $100,000 reward, filled the countryside surrounding Washington with troops and other searchers, Booth, aided by a Confederate sympathizer, hid for days in Maryland. Having undertaken further efforts to escape, Booth was tracked down by federal troops at a farm in Virginia near the Rappahannock River. Refusing to surrender, Booth was shot and died shortly thereafter. Mahatma Gandhi. While Indian anti-colonial nationalist Mahatma Gandhi was walking towards the dais in the large mansion in New Delhi, where he had been conducting multi-faith prayer meetings every evening, Nathuram Godse, a member of the RSS, a right-wing Hindu paramilitary organization, stepped out from the crowd, flanking Gandhi's path and fired 3 deadly bullets into Gandhi's chest and stomach, because in Godse's opinion, Gandhi had betrayed his Hindu religion and culture by supporting Muslims at the expense of Hindus, and that the only answer to violent aggression was violent self-defense. Godse was captured by members of the crowd and handed over to the police. He was sentenced to death in November 1949. Although petitions for commutation were made by Gandhi's 2 sons, they were turned down by India's Prime Minister, and 7 days after the sentence, Godse was hanged. You might need to know that Godse had actually made 2 previous failed attempts to assassinate Gandhi before, using a knife and a grenade, but he had been released owing to Gandhi's policy of not pressing criminal charges. Archduke Franz Ferdinand. While being driven through the streets of Sarajevo, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie were shot by Bosnian Serb student Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old recruit of the Serbian nationalist organization known as the Black Hand. Princip was a part of a group of 6 assassins. He and the 5 other conspirators lined the route, each one with instructions to assassinate the Archduke when the royal car reached their position. The first conspirator on the route to see the royal car lost his nerve and allowed the car to pass without taking action. When the motorcade passed the central police station, the second conspirator hurled a hand grenade at the Archduke's car. The driver accelerated when he saw the object flying towards him, and the bomb exploded under the 4th car. 2 of the occupants were seriously wounded, and the motorcade sped away. On arriving at the governor's residence, Franz asked, "So you welcome your guests with bombs?" But it didn't end here. After the Archduke gave his scheduled speech at town hall, he decided to visit the victims of the grenade attack at the Sarajevo hospital. To avoid the city center, officers decided that the royal car should travel straight to the hospital. However, they forgot to inform the driver about this decision. On the way to the hospital, the driver, following the original plan, turned onto a side street where Princip was in front of a local shop. After the governor shouted at him, the driver stopped in front of a shop and began to reverse. As he did so, the engine broke down. Princip stepped forward, drew a Browning semi-automatic pistol, and fired twice into the car, hitting the Archduke and his wife. Before Princip could fire for a 3rd time, the pistol was wrested from his hand and he was pushed to the ground. He managed to swallow a capsule of cyanide, which failed to kill him. He and his fellows were all arrested. But why was the Archduke assassinated? As the multinational Austro-Hungarian Empire ruled over many Slavic peoples, nationalist groups felt it was oppressing non-German ethnic groups. By eliminating the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Princip hoped to weaken the empire's control. The Black Hand was a secret military society formed in 1911 that was dedicated to uniting all Serb lands into a single state. Bosnia and Herzegovina, which had previously been ruled by the Ottoman Empire, had been annexed by Austria-Hungary 6 years before the assassination, as illustrated by this old French magazine. However, like Princip, many Bosnian Serbs still sought to break away from Austrian rule. Princip was born in Austrian-occupied Bosnia to a poor Serb family. After attending anti-Austrian demonstrations in Sarajevo, he was expelled from school. He traveled to southern Serbia to volunteer with the Serbian forces fighting against the Ottoman Empire, but was rejected for being too small and weak. The assassination led to Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia, marking the start of World War I. As Princip was 27 days younger than the minimum age limit required to face capital punishment, he received the maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. He died in prison from tuberculosis 4 years later. Before his death, he asserted that the First World War would have occurred even if the assassination "please like" had not taken place, and that he cannot feel himself, and subscribe for more, responsible for the catastrophe.